A lot of people just fail to understand that every day, every second, we are living in a world that was not made for us. It was made for a different sensory processing system. It's like navigating when you are a bit drunk. You are trying to comprehend things that don't make sense, but something that makes sense to you doesn't make sense to others. Take a moment and really let those words sink in. That incredibly powerful quote comes directly from a neurodivergent student who participated in a focus group run by the Unite group. And honestly, it perfectly sets the emotional baseline for what we are looking at today, the hidden everyday struggles that neurodivergent students face in higher education.
So, welcome to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled to have you here. Today, we're diving into a brilliant collection of source materials. We're looking at research from the Unite Group, an assessment study from King's College, and a truly groundbreaking inclusion policy from the University of Strathclyde. We're going to synthesize these three key sources to fundamentally reframe how universities can, and frankly, should, support neurodivergent students. Just like our title suggests, we're exploring how to treat these brilliant minds as an asset, not a problem.
Okay, let's dive into our roadmap for today. First, defining the neurodivergent experience. Second, transition and student accommodation. Third, assessments and academic challenges. Fourth, redefining institutional policies. And finally, building an inclusive future.
Section 1. Defining the neurodivergent experience. So the term neurodiversity was actually coined back in 1998 by the Australian sociologist Judy Singer. And according to the Innate Group report, this concept was completely revolutionary. Why? Because it presented a positive approach based on the social model of disability. Instead of looking at conditions like autism or ADHD as medical deficits that somehow need to be cured, neurodiversity recognizes them as natural, normal variations in human cognition. It's this massive shift from asking what's wrong with this person to asking how is this person's brain naturally wired to process the world.
Now, what's really interesting and honestly pretty stark about this data is the contrast it reveals. When the Unite group surveyed over 2,000 university applicants, they found that neurodivergent students are facing massive mental health disparities compared to the general student body. Look at this. Just over half, 52%, had experienced depression in the last 2 years, and it gets even higher with anxiety, hitting almost 2/3 at 63%. These numbers are way above the average for all applicants. This tells us right out of the gate that simply navigating a neurotypical system is taking a severe toll on these students' mental well-being long before they even step foot into a lecture hall.
Section 2. Transition and student accommodation.
We all know moving away to university is stressful for literally everyone, right? But for neurodivergent students, standard onboarding processes can cause absolute extreme anxiety. The Unite Group focus groups highlighted a massive issue with information overload. We're talking an avalanche of emails where really important tasks just get completely lost. Then there's the agonizing wait for room allocations, which are sometimes given out barely a month before move-in. Arrival day itself, often described as chaotic and totally overwhelming, because you're trying to unpack your entire life while simultaneously meeting a bunch of complete strangers. Because of all this, there's a really strong desire among these students to just have the option to live with other neurodivergent or queer students. They're looking to create an immediate sense of safety and understanding right from day one. Which brings us to this concept of hibernation. It really captures a vital coping mechanism mentioned in the research. Because communal spaces, like shared dorm kitchens, can be so socially and sensorily overwhelming, a lot of neurodivergent students essentially go into hibernation. They retreat to the dark, quiet safety of their own rooms for long periods just to decompress. One student actually mentioned it took them 4 whole months just to start using the common kitchen, and even then, they would only do it late at night when it was perfectly quiet.
And why exactly is the environment so overwhelming? Well, it really comes down to sensory issues. For a neurodivergent student, a buzzing light or a humming heating pipe aren't just minor, easily ignored annoyances. They can trigger severe distress and total sensory overload. Heavy footsteps from the floor above can be deeply upsetting. Bright, unadjustable lighting can feel like a glaring hospital room, causing literal visual pain. And sudden, unannounced 7 a.m. fire alarm tests, they completely shatter a routine and cause a lingering anxiety that can make it impossible to sleep the night before.
Then you have the social hurdles. One student described the intense anxiety of feeling like a complicated package, basically feeling like you're an inconvenience or a burden when you're just trying to make friends. But the research also highlighted a beautiful, profound contrast. It talked about the immense inner peace these students found when they connected with peer groups like the Bristol University Neurodiversity Society, or BUNS. When they were finally surrounded by peers whose brains worked just like theirs, they didn't have to explain themselves or apologize.
They could just simply exist.
Section 3. Assessments and academic challenges.
Stepping into the classroom now, the King's College study brilliantly illustrates the academic divide for neurodivergent learners. They found that the style of assessment actually has a massive impact. Online assessments were overwhelmingly favored, mostly because they allow for a much more controlled, customized environment. On the flip side, though, students express significant reservations about memory-based assessments. Think your traditional closed-book timed exams. Those are highly stressful, and honestly, they often just fail to accurately measure a neurodivergent student's true understanding of the material.
The King's College study also dug into the hidden costs of collaborative learning. While group work is obviously meant to build community, neurodivergent students reported real anxiety over being perceived as an inconvenience to their groupmates. To cope with this, they often engage in something called masking, which means accepting extra academic and emotional stress just to hide their neurodivergence from their peers. And this immense pressure is compounded even further when academic feedback is vague. For a brain that relies on clear, concrete information, ambiguous marking criteria isn't just frustrating, it can be completely paralyzing.
Section 4. Redefining institutional policies.
So we've seen the individual struggles. Now let's zoom out to the macro level to see how universities can structurally adapt. To understand what a real systemic solution looks like, we're going to look at the University of Strathclyde. They developed a comprehensive student disability and neurodivergence inclusion policy. What's incredible about this policy is that it is firmly grounded in that social model of disability we talked about earlier. It formally recognizes that it's the societal and institutional barriers, not the individual impairments, that actually disable people.
Strathclyde's approach is built on 5 core guiding principles. First is equity, meaning providing equitable, not just identical opportunities. Second, it's student-centered. They treat students as active partners in designing their own support systems. Third, it's proactive, aiming to anticipate needs right from the very beginning. Fourth is strict legal compliance. And fifth is transparency, ensuring all information and support pathways are totally clear and accessible. By adopting these principles, Strathclyde effectively shifts the burden of accommodation completely off the shoulders of the struggling student and places it right onto the institution itself.
So the crucial point here is this concept, Universal Design for Learning, or UDL. Strathclyde actively promotes UDL as the ultimate game changer. Instead of waiting for a student to fail or struggle and then creating some special exception for them, UDL means designing your curriculum and your teaching methods to be inclusive from the ground up. The beauty of universal design is that by designing for the margins, for those with the highest, most specific needs, you actually create a more flexible, accessible, and just flat-out better learning environment for absolutely everyone.
Let's quickly compare these two ideas. On one hand, we have reactive adjustments. That's making individual extensions or exceptions only after a student goes through the highly stressful process of formally disclosing their disability. While legally necessary, it's exhausting. But then, compare that to anticipatory design. This means inclusive materials, caption videos, and flexible group work are just built in as standard practice for the whole class. True inclusion happens when barriers are anticipated and removed before the student even enters the room.
Finally, Section 5, Building an Inclusive Future. Let's synthesize all of our sources and see how this builds into concrete, highly achievable steps that any institution can implement right now. Number 1, cut the email avalanche and provide a single, clear, bulleted checklist for onboarding. Number 2, offer early move-in dates so students can acclimatize in peace and provide opt-ins for neurodivergent flatmates. Number 3, proactively design quiet flats that are placed far away from noisy areas and install simple things like dimmer switches. And number 4, mandate neurodiversity training for all staff, and we mean everyone, not just professors, but accommodation porters and maintenance teams too.
Which really leaves us with a question for you. You don't have to be a university dean to apply these principles. How can you shift your own environments, whether you manage an office, teach a class, or run a local community space, to proactively remove barriers before someone has to ask? How can you apply the principles of universal design to make your space better for everyone?
I want to leave you with this final, incredibly powerful quote from one of the students in the Unite group research: "We're an asset, not a problem." Neurodivergent students bring incredible focus, highly unique perspectives, and brilliant minds to our institutions. When we stop managing them as inconveniences and start proactively supporting them as the assets they are, everybody wins. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer today. I'll leave you with this thought.
If a world designed only for neurotypical brains disables the neurodivergent, what untapped genius are we currently losing out on? And more importantly, what will you do today to unlock it?